The Roman legions were invincible, or so they believed. Across the eastern horizon, the scorching plains of Carrhae awaited. Here, ambition would meet disaster, and the might of Rome would be humiliated in a way the world had never seen. The Roman Empire had conquered the known world, or so it believed. Legions marched through Europe and North Africa, crushing kings and tribes alike. Yet as Marcus Licinius Crassus stood on the sun-scorched plains of Syria, staring eastward toward the lands of Mesopotamia, a question whispered in the wind: could Rome's might survive the unknown? The man himself was larger than life, not in stature alone, but in ambition. Crassus, the wealthiest man in Rome, had long envied the glory of Pompey and Caesar. Now he sought to etch his name into history by conquering Parthia, a realm of swift horsemen, endless deserts, and cunning generals. Behind him, 35,000 Roman soldiers marched with shining armor, disciplined formations, and the unshakable confidence of men who had never faced true defeat. They carried with them the pride of Rome, banners fluttering against a cloudless sky, and the promise of chlorine gold. Yet tension simmered beneath the surface. Whispers among the officers warned of Parthian archers who could strike from impossible distances, and scouts reported movements on the horizon. Swift riders appearing and disappearing like shadows. Some suggested caution, others mockery. Crassus dismissed them all. He believed Roman discipline and heavy infantry could crush any foe, no matter how cunning. His eyes glinted with greed, ambition, and perhaps a touch of arrogance, for Rome had rarely failed him, and he saw Parthia as a prize waiting to be plucked. Across the plains, another figure watched silently. General Shunna, commander of the Parthian forces. Calm, calculating, and infinitely patient, Shunna knew that brute strength alone would not defeat Rome. He had spent years studying their tactics, memorizing their formations, predicting their overconfidence. With a few thousand horse archers and a cohort of cataphracts, he planned a trap. One that would turn Rome's greatest weapon, its heavy legions, into a vulnerable target. The winds of Carrhae whispered through the grass, carrying the promise of disaster. The stage was set. Roman banners gleamed under the unforgiving sun. Parthian cavalry lingered on the horizon, mere shadows against the light, yet ominously close. Soldiers tightened grips on their swords, tightened their shields, and whispered prayers to Jupiter Mars and the spirits of their ancestors. Crassus, however, remained blind to the storm gathering around him. He saw only opportunity, victory, and immortality. As the first scouts rode back, panting and pale, their warnings were clear. The Parthians were ready, and they would not fight a fair battle. Crassus, ever confident, dismissed their fear as cowardice. He would meet the enemy head-on, marching into the heart of Mesopotamia, unaware that every step drew him closer to catastrophe. And then it happened. From the horizon, tiny specks began to move, fast, precise, and innumerable. The wind carried the faint twang of bowstrings, almost imperceptible at first. The Roman soldiers stiffened, squinting against the sun. Something was coming, something relentless, something that would test Rome like never before. What Crassus did not yet realize was that the plains of Carrhae were about to become a graveyard, and the empire he loved so dearly would face its most humiliating defeat. And as the first arrows darkened the sky, one question burned in every Roman heart. Could they survive the storm they had walked into? The sun beat down mercilessly on the plains of Carrhae. Dust swirled around Roman sandals and horse hooves alike, creating a haze that blurred the horizon. Crassus rode at the center of his army, tall and imperious on his horse, his purple cloak fluttering in the wind. Around him, disciplined cohorts marched in perfect formation, shields interlocked, spears ready. Confidence was high, even as the first faint shadows of movement appeared at the edge of the desert. Sir, a scout shouted, dust-choked, to the Parthians. They do not advance in formation. They circle, retreat, strike from afar. Cowardly tactics, Crassus interrupted sharply, his voice cutting across the clamor. Romans do not chase shadows. We fight the enemy head-on, with courage, steel, and discipline. Lead the men forward, behind him. Whispers among the officers betrayed unease. Some remembered past Parthian raids. Some remembered the advice of cautious generals. Yet none dared openly challenge Crassus, whose ambition now outweighed prudence. From the east, like phantoms rising from the heat, the Parthian horse archers appeared. Swift and almost invisible, they began to rain arrows upon the advancing legions. The twang of thousands of bowstrings filled the air, a sound like the crackle of fire across dry grass. Soldiers raised shields, forming their famous testudo, but the sheer volume of arrows made every step perilous. Dust and pain blurred the line between reality and chaos. "Hold formation," Crassus roared, but even he could not ignore the growing panic. "Advance. Do not falter." Yet Shurna's strategy was flawless. The Parthians feigned retreat, drawing Roman cohorts into long lines, thinning their defenses. Then, like shadows at dusk, cataphracts, heavily armored Parthian cavalry struck the flanks, crushing the overextended Roman soldiers in sudden, brutal charges. "How do you see now, Crassus?" An aide whispered, fear and awe mingled in his voice. "We are surrounded." "They strike, retreat, and strike again. We cannot catch them." Crassus' jaw tightened. Pride and rage warred within him. Rome has never fallen. Rome will not fall today. But reality was unyielding. Horses thundered across the plain. Arrows rained like hail, and Roman formations began to fracture. Screams and the clash of steel filled the air. Soldiers fell in lines, dust rising around broken shields, a grim testament to the power of mobility over brute force. Amid the chaos, Crassus sought to negotiate, attempting to parley with Shurna. But the Parthian general, calm and calculating, received him not with honor but with deceit. Shurna's horsemen encircled the Romans, and in a swift, brutal stroke, Crassus was killed, his dream of glory extinguished. As night fell, the survivors of the Roman legions huddled in scattered formations, wounded, exhausted, and demoralized. News of the disaster would reach Rome like a thunderclap, shaking the Senate, inflaming rivalries, and foreshadowing future conflicts. Yet even in defeat, the story of Carrhae was far from over. The Parthians, masters of strategy and patience, had not only won a battle, they had humiliated the greatest power of the Mediterranean. And as the embers of the plains glowed under the fading sun, one question lingered in the minds of every Roman. How would Rome respond, and who would pay the price for this greatest humiliation? The wind carried the stench of death across the plains of Carrhae. Broken shields, shattered spears, and the bodies of the fallen lay scattered beneath a sky smeared with dust and smoke. The Roman legions, once the pride of the Republic, were a shattered shadow of themselves. Survivors huddled in ragged clusters, their eyes wide with disbelief, the horror of defeat settling into their bones. News of the disaster traveled faster than any messenger could. By the time it reached Rome, panic had set in. Senators whispered behind closed doors, their words sharp with accusation and fear. "Crassus is dead," they said. "The East is lost. Parthia grows stronger every day." Political rivalries that had simmered for years now ignited into a dangerous blaze. Pompey and Caesar, each ambitious and calculating, realized that the balance of power in Rome had shifted overnight. The humiliation of Carrhae would echo in the Senate for decades to come. Yet for those on the plains, the reality was immediate and personal. Soldiers who had marched proudly under Roman banners now wandered in shock. Some tried to bury comrades, others tried to regroup, but the Parthians, masters of speed and strategy, allowed none to recover. Every step eastward had become a trap. Every attempt at retreat was harried by the relentless archers. In the midst of it all, the death of Crassus loomed largest. Once the richest and most powerful man in Rome, he had sought glory above caution, ambition above prudence. His final moments were a mixture of desperation and disbelief, a man realizing too late that wealth and arrogance could not conquer skill and strategy. And yet, even in death, his story would shape Rome. For the Republic, the lesson was bitter and unforgettable. Hubris could topple even the mightiest. Parthia, meanwhile, celebrated not merely victory, but prestige. The reputation of their horse archers and cataphracts spread across the known world, marking the first time Rome had been humiliated in open battle. Generals, historians, and poets would recount Carrhae for generations, warning that brute force alone could not crush ingenuity, mobility, or discipline in different forms. Back in Rome, families mourned the sons, husbands, and fathers who would never return. The Senate debated campaigns of revenge, yet political paralysis gripped the city. Some saw opportunity, a chance for Caesar to consolidate power, or for Pompey to claim glory, while others feared the fragile republic might fracture under the weight of ambition, grief, and fear. Amid the devastation, one truth remained undeniable. The plains of Carrhae had changed history. Rome's eastern ambitions were delayed for decades. The balance of power had shifted to Parthia, and the Republic, though mighty, had been reminded of its limits. As the sun set behind distant mountains, casting long shadows over the field, The survivors of Rome looked out across the horizon, haunted but alive. The hum of arrows, the thunder of hooves, the cries of comrades, all of it would linger in memory, shaping a new generation of soldiers and leaders. And somewhere in the heart of every Roman, a question burned quietly. How many more ambitions, how many more mistakes before Rome learns humility? The empire had endured, but Carrhae had left a scar, one that would define the legacy of Crassus, the might of Rome, and the cunning of Parthia for centuries to come.